So let's talk about this article that pretty much says that black men are the white supremacists to black women. Um, as I've stated before, gotta keep reiterating that Ebony, Essence, HuffPost, Black Voices, Jezebel, they got a new one. Jezebel is more white operated. The rest are also white operated, but they have black faces in the beginning, in the forefront right now out of the articles. But all these spaces are not for black heterosexual men at all, and they're used to attack you. And here we have another example of a black male feminist, I assume, um, attacking black men and painting black men as these inherently violent creatures, and they are the biggest threat to black women. And we're gonna talk about that real quick. So I'm gonna leave two links probably to the Yvette Cornell, Dr. Tommy Curry interview, because Dr. Tommy Curry has actually been discussing this gender, intersectionality, white privilege, all that. He's been breaking that down. One thing, again, I don't subscribe to his or Yvette Cornell's political views. They're very leftist in their ideology. I don't subscribe to that, but I do respect the fact that they do call out their other leftist allies in academia, specifically Dr. Tommy Curry. He's always debunking and challenging this bourgeoisie intellectual class and these lazy academics when it comes to race, gender, and theory. But it's weird because I've seen a lot of people who I do respect and sharing the article, trying to get comments from it and all that. I didn't know at the time, but I know now that like some of these posts were sparked behind this. But I've been commenting on different spaces. Like this is the Huff Post. This is actually not the article. This is a black woman responding to the article. um, and she's saying that because of the responses that it's possible that we got a lot of work to do. I'm like, nah. The responses might indicate that the article's full of shit, which it is. And Dr. Tommy Curry, I'm gonna play two clips from his interview with Yvette Cornell, and he's gonna break it down with the data. Now, I simply posed this because I'm like, a lot of things we can address and we can deal with if we didn't point fingers and we just address the issue. I think that this topic is definitely one of those topics when it comes to abuse in black relationships, right? Because that was one of the problems in his article. He didn't really use data and all that, but he was conflating like violence, period, with the data between black male female relationships, which is disproportionately high from black men and also from black women, right? So Dr. Tommy Craig will point out later. He points out that violence between black men and women in relationships are bi-directional, meaning they be beating each other ass, which in essence makes black men look like bitches too because they be getting their ass whooped by their girls. But that's a different topic. The article points that out. I mean, Dr. Tommy Curry points that out. The CDC points that out. That shit goes both ways. It's not like, And I was on the comment section onto this specific article on Black Voices Post or whatever, and I made that same argument. I said, this article's purpose is to paint black men as these inherently evil creatures, and they are the greatest threats to black women. And I argue, well, according to the data, black male, black female situations of violence are bi-directional. We know for a fact that black women are more likely to murder their children, right? In America, every year, 200 women kill their children despite race. We also know that black women are more likely to abuse their children, and lesbian relationships have higher domestic abuse situations. So, and I said all that to say, to illustrate a point that clearly women are just as violent as men, and that's what this article doesn't want to touch, it doesn't want to address. And of course, there's a million comments responding to me that deny the allegations without addressing evidence. One Latino dude is talking about, I don't think that's right. You're deflecting, and you copied and pasted your comment. I'm like, what the fuck? Okay, let's say I did do that, but can you refute what I said? Can you give me data and evidence that says what I'm saying is wrong? People kept saying, well, this article ain't got nothing to do with women abusing their women and LBGs. I'm like, no, but I'm showing you precedent for why this idea that black women are completely innocent in a situation. You can't make that argument, which the author of that article tried to do. You can't make that argument because black women are just as violent. Like, that's the whole point. And one sister comments later, and she's a teacher, and she specifically says, yo, I'm a teacher. The black girls are more violent than the other girls. The black girls are more likely to hit the boys. So she confirms that from her own empirical evidence that, yes, black women are just as violent. They're not innocent victims. And of course, you had the typical response of, well, white people do it too, and all other nonsense like that. That's not the conversation. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what we do. But one thing I think is interesting about the whole dialogue is that even when men go over and above and do things like this, because this is a man writing the article, and the video I'm showing you, right, the clip, that's the response from another black woman. She's going to double down on, you know, the character assassination of black men as a collective. Is that when these dudes do this, they don't even really get a lot of credit for it, right? Because you remember, because he mentions the whole my brother's keeper shit, which is, we all know was bullshit. It was not policy. It was freaking charity, and nothing has come of it. And we saw how things were blocked and things didn't add up and money couldn't be used right when the exception of the charity was instituted, right? The problem with charity is it removes people from actually going to their government and asking for actual policy. So we don't want charity, we want policy. There's a difference. And Obama's My Brother's Keeper it wasn't real. But even though it wasn't real, it wasn't anything tangible, we had 1,000 black men who stood up and wrote a letter, petition saying, like 10,000 black men actually. And the funny thing is, none of those black men even got any credit for doing that first. They did that before the feminists and the celebrities like Rosario Dawson and all the other women. No, we demand that you include women and girls into that space, right? So a policy that we all addressed that we see now, it was instituted like 5 years ago, nothing's come of it. We all know that it wasn't actual policy, but it was just an initiative. It was, in essence, charity with corporations and stuff like that. And we can say it didn't mean anything, and yet it still was cock black, right? So it's like, any type of attention you put on black men who are failing and need help, we get these responses. That's crazy. And you can say the same thing about the situation that's going on right now with Kamala Harris. She was just on Roland Martin's show, and her and Cory Booker are trying to do this, bipartisan thing with criminal justice and whatnot. And on the thing, they said women are the new demographic to do X, Y, Z, right? We keep hearing these things. Roland loves to use the statistics, and black women, that's all, folks. Black women are, the number one to do this and number one to do that. And I'm like, well, come on, bruh. Like, we got to stop doing that. Like, we all know that 20% of 100 is better than 50% of 30, right? Like, that shit doesn't mean anything. I'm going to talk about it in a different video, but he was talking about black women and guns and I'm gonna address that in a different conversation. But yeah, you have a spike in numbers of women going to prison and whatnot, right? And instead of focusing on the fact that black men are arrested and incarcerated 10 to 100,000, some shit like that, a ridiculous, disproportionate number. Black women's number is way lower. I forgot. Tone Talks, you ready for now already discussed that. But even though there's disproportionately male, you have politicians like Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. Instead of addressing the men and the bigger threat and the bigger issue, they're over here talking about let's get to take care of these women. Oh, it's sad that these are women, these are moms, and the blah blah blah. But what about all the men that are in situations for the same thing? And it's not necessarily the people who are criminals, because that's the first thing people say is, well, they shouldn't be committing no crimes. Some of these people are not even guilty. Her specific bill is to deal with the money and how when people are poor, and this doesn't just help women, it helps poor people, period, white and black. But when people are poor, they go to the bail bondsman. If you don't have the 20 grand for the bail, you got to put 2% down, and you don't even get that 2% back if you put it down. But the person who does have the 20 grand, when they want their money back, they get all their money back, right? So she wants to address that. But I say all to say this, that again, the danger, the biggest threat in that situation is black men, but they're focusing on women. So that shows you how much that people really don't care about black male issues. And we are disposable, period. Again, when Obama did his Morehouse speech, a lot of people didn't like it, respectability politics and put yourself by your bootstraps. But he said something that was true in all that nobody cares about your plane, nobody cares about your excuses, you don't have any. And he doubled down and said in a different speech, I would never go to Barnard College, which is a female college. And he said he would not give that same speech to women, but he would give it to a bunch of black men who are going into an economy that he was a president of. There ain't no jobs available. It wasn't like he was talking to Pookies and Ray Rays. He was talking to black men that had their degrees and they did the right steps and were in the right place. And he still gave that man a respectability politics speech. Again, it proves that black men have no allies. They have no friends. Nobody cares about your issues. And then to see these articles, right? Because if you remember Amber Phillips when she was on the Breakfast Club, and I did a video covering that, the whole argument when they were trying to chastise Charlamagne for him meeting with Tommy Lauren, their argument was, well, what you're doing is dangerous. And again, like, it's dangerous for you black men, right? It wasn't dangerous for black women. She was saying the rhetoric that Tommy speaks is dangerous for black men. So instead of Charlamagne being a man, not knowing what he's doing, right? You're trying to speak on behalf of him and whatnot. But if your whole argument was that what they said, what she said was wrong, and it can cause a consequences to black men, what do you think Amber Phillips' statement of, well, black women, she gave some ridiculous, stupid number of how many women are killed by homicides, and when you look at the data, black men are more likely to be killed by homicides. Black from the ages of like 15 to 25. When you look at the data, black women in those same age ranges, their death is not homicide; it's other health-related issues, not even homicides, right? So, and sitting right there, Charlamagne bitch ass, he could Google and check shit out. Don't take that long. Didn't do it. I'm gonna look that up later. But right then and there, she said that statement, and she was unchallenged. And again, I say this: if what you think Tommy Loren was saying was bad for black men, what do you think what you just said was bad? How that would affect the perception of black men? How do you think articles like this do for the perception of black men? If you're saying that black men are just inherently violent, they kill and abuse and beat their own women to a ridiculous astronomical number, how does this not be used to justify black men being taken down and being killed? I don't know, it's just interesting times to be in, like, to see, like, absolutely there's a lot of, I don't subscribe to the people who don't want to critique the black community and stuff like that, and as soon as you start talking about things that they get mad and they get dry and they want to go somewhere else, they only want to talk about white supremacy all day. There's definitely a lot of critiques that go wrong with the black community, and there's things that absolutely need to be addressed. There are rogue males, there There's rape and pillage. All that stuff needs to be addressed. But you can't do it from these intellectual dishonesty articles. And when you paint these pictures that, I mean, it's clear as day. How many videos on YouTube can you see of young girls just beating the shit out of black dudes and they don't even respond? They don't even hit them back. Right? Black women are no less violent than black men. There isn't some disproportionate. I mean, of course, the number of men who do it are doing it slightly more, but on both ends, black dude's likely to get killed by his wife just as much as a black woman is likely to get killed by her husband. Period. And we both, and I've seen the videos where the women, the swirlers, the black diaspora, what does they call it, Blackistan women, they use their data. Then you got the extreme on the other end, the Tommy Sotomayor's who use their data. But the reality is, if you watch both sections, you realize it's happening on both ends. Stop painting this picture of black men being these monsters when we have no power. That's the craziest thing about it. As you will hear in Dr. Tommy Curry's commentary, that black men have to be the worst patriarchies because we're at the bottom of every number. So the whole point of the patriarchy is to build yourself up and be ahead of the women and all this other stuff and deny other people from catching up with you. Well, we absolutely didn't do any of that. So you can't make that argument. I don't know. But check out these two videos from Dr. Tommy Curry and Yvette Cornell. Again, I don't co-sign their philosophy at all, but I give credit where credit is due and I critique when I disagree. I'm probably about to go check out Tony Moore and see his in a few seconds, see what he says, but I'm sure he's going to break down that exact number of the per capita of women and men in prison. And the funny thing about this is that I even said that when I responded in a HuffPost situation. I said, when you remove poverty, these numbers go down drastically on both sides. But people don't even want to hear that. They act like it's just you're being, biased or whatever. I'm like, no, I acknowledge that it's disproportionate on one end. It's also disproportionate on the other end. And the whole premise is black women are no less violent than black men. Period. So the author's article is bogus. Oh, another thing I was thinking about too is they talk about, they play this tit for tat and boo-hoo, woe is me. And one thing I do notice that is fact is that, and Sarge talked about this in one of his videos about things being non-effective. I understand that black women do not like that black men don't have the same knee-jerk reactions to situations that they have. Black men are more poised. We look at the facts, we look at all the situations, and we react. And a lot of times, if we don't see a solution or an end game or a positive outcome, we're not going to do something just to do it the way women do. Like, we don't operate like that. And black women use that and hold that against black men. An example would be the Corinne Gaines situation when black men are looking at what this chick is doing. They're like, well, this young lady looks like she's unstable. She looks like there's some mental instability there. Right? So that is going to cloud your judgment on how you react to the situation. Then when we look at what she did, most of us are like, well, damn, I would have never, she died at home, right? Using her kids and shit and all that other stuff. But black men would have never, ever made it home to do that. If we would have did what she did in the car with that Hotep bullshit about natural rights and human rights and all that other stuff and not being a citizen, we would have got her ass whooped right then and there. We wouldn't have got her, let alone, get your car towed and go to jail, get out and go back home that day. So I'm saying if we're looking at it like that, like, okay, wait a minute. She was doing a little bit too much. When you see other people, the brother who was standing by the car, he didn't do anything. He looks like a bad dude. He gets shot and killed. We saw that. Eric Gardner, I'm choking. They claim he resisted or whatever, but he clearly used a chokehold that was not proper to use, and he's dead, right? So I'm saying, if we're looking at a situation, we see these men who do nothing, but then we see a situation like Corinne Gaines, who definitely was agitating the situation, and she had a shotgun. It's like, can you even conflate those two arguments? Can you conflate those situations? Like, I don't think you can. But again, we're judged because we don't have that same knee-jerk reaction that they would. Again, and another thing too is women will try to use that they do protest and march in situations when the reality is a lot of black men, and you'll hear this from the Blackistan women and the colorist chicks who say black men don't build is, well, black women shouldn't be out there protesting anyways, right? And I agree they shouldn't. But when we say y'all can't, y'all call that sexism and not letting women lead and all this other bull crap. But then when y'all are out there and y'all get hit with tear gas or something like that, then we're also looked at as bitches because you shouldn't have to be out there. Like, well, we didn't ask you to be out there, and you can't use that as an argument to say we support you and we do this and we that if we ain't asked you to be out there. Because lo and behold, a lot of brothers wish you would not go out there. Again, Sarge made the point, and I'm gonna keep reiterating it. If black women are the most unprotected group on the planet, why are you letting Maxine Waters and Angela Rye and Kamala Harris make you the face of Trump's impeachment when you don't even have the power politically to do so? Democrats ain't got the power to do shit right now. So y'all just talking, and black women are being made the face of it, and all these disposable tiki torch males are running around, and y'all face is the face of his impeachment. Does that make sense to do that? Does that make sense to put yourself in these situations, in these arguments, if you're quote unquote the least protected person on this planet? Why do you instigate and put yourselves in situations where you will be dealt with, and then turn around and say we're not being protected? Like, well, a lot of men ain't gonna put themselves in that situation. And one thing we don't even acknowledge is when this conversation happens is we don't even address how many men have been in jail or are dead because they intervened and interacted in a situation and the woman was lying, or they didn't have all the evidence and they had a knee-jerk reaction. We don't even take account for that. A lot of men have had that situation or that experience and they're jaded forever. They had a girl cry wolf time one too many times, and that has affected them. But none of those things are taken account of. All it is the optics. Oh, black men ain't out here protesting for us the way we do for them. Like, and Dr. Tommy Curry breaks that down. He's talking about how, okay, so, give context to what do you mean by that? When you say that, okay, we really only march and do all that stuff for 2 or 3 people a year, right? If that. Depends on which ones got more popularity and which ones were in the headlines in the media. There's like 198 others that die that we don't get any attention to and we never cover. But it's almost like they're saying that the 20 women who, deal with the situation here are more important than those other damn near 300, right? So it's like, if this is the greatest threat and the data says this is the biggest number, wouldn't you focus on that thing first? It is, but it's where in every element, though, in every angle, whether it's this, the prison situation, when we want to focus on black boys and getting their shit together and getting their reading grade levels up and all that, we can't do anything. I had this epiphany too because I was watching an episode of The Breakfast Club, and I think it had Jay Farrell, the dude who does the voices, and he talked about how he gave a shout out and gave credit. You saw the skit where he was shouting out all the other comedians and doing their voices, whatever. And he had said some chick, and I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was the chick that was in the she was in the new Ghostbusters movie. I forgot her name, but her, if I'm not mistaken, it's her. And he was saying how she called him mad because he didn't shout out her, a woman comic. So this is a black man who had a skit, who probably had declared with his bosses, whatever, do this. And it's like, mind you, she's not even on those levels, right? Like, she's new. She's just now getting her break, her shot, her shine, right? And she thinks she should have been mentioned with those other men. That shit is ridiculous. Even today, Boyce had posted something, I'm going to talk about this in a separate video, where he was just giving encouragement to black men. Simple words that were free. Like, they didn't cost that much. It wasn't that deep. And you can't see how many people went on that comment section and hit him with the this is sexist, this is racist. And even black men saying, well, he should have included black women. I'm like, God damn. Like, Mr. Research says this all the time, that even we don't even look out for each other like other people look out for us sometimes. That's crazy. To when you take an L, instead of addressing your issues and you don't really have any political capital, and you'll still shift it away to someone else. Like, that's deep that we do that. And that kind of proves what Boyce was saying in his little status was. But I'll probably talk about that in a different video. But check out these two clips from Yvette and Dr. Tommy Curry. He breaks it down a little bit better than I can. Deuces.
Right.
To me.
Right. And there's a certain element of scapegoating going on here as well. Okay. You know, again, this is what I'm saying is that there's a constant conflation in these pieces between general homicide rates in communities, which more likely than not happen between strangers during robberies, during, you know, meeting people, etc., and then intimate partner violence, which they claim is a unique threat to women. So when you talk about these things, you have to separate what's the actual causality. The rates of domestic violence in the United States amongst black people. So I don't need people, and this is what I mean. So when people do their Google searches, you're going to find stuff that talks about the rates of men and women. You have to look specifically at the dynamics between black men and black women in this country. And overwhelmingly, domestic violence in this country amongst blacks is defined by their neighborhood location and poverty. So when you're looking at rates, it's disproportionate for black women, it's disproportionate for black men. People like Robert Hampton has shown that the risk of being killed by a spouse for black women and for black men are the same. That means that it is just as likely that a black woman will kill her husband as it is that a black man will kill his wife. And this has been the case in the United States at least since the 1970s, probably before. And this is actual data, right? This is looking at actual facts. FBI supplements, Bureau of Justice Statistics, their summaries. It has simply been the case that spousal homicide in the black community has always been greater than that of the white community. Now, when we talk about the risk that black women have to death and murder at the hands of black men, what we're talking about is the accumulation of cycles of violence. And those cycles of violence are not isolated to black men being the primary perpetrators. In black communities, violence is bi-directional, which means that black women hit black men hit black women. There is verbal abuse. There is physical abuse. There is emotional neglect, because these are toxic environments. People are poor. People are unemployed. People are on drugs. People are on other substances. People have had previous histories of abuse. People have been victims of racism. People suffer from depression. That's what these communities look like. That is what all the data about black people have said for the last 15 years in these journals. So to say, as this author does, that black men have a commitment to beating and killing black women because of their male privilege and patriarchy is dishonest and a misrepresentation of almost 2 decades of social science literature on this fact. So what we do again is we're scapegoating black men for problems of structural violence in our communities. Now, when I tell people this, they usually say, well, I just can't believe that black women abuse men. Because in our society, we are conditioned to believe that black women are the opposite of violence and naturally good. But in these very same communities of poverty, of structural neglect and isolation from society, black women overwhelmingly commit the majorities of child abuse, where the rates of black children being abused are twice that of the white counterpart. So what people like Mr. Young expect us to believe is that while we have all kinds of violence in these neighborhoods, poor black neighborhoods that have high rates of homicide, high rates of child abuse, right? But suddenly we can't believe that those same environments have high levels of domestic abuse. Somehow domestic abuse becomes this unique thing in and of itself, and that is manifestly false. That's why I say that it's extremely dangerous to have blogs like this which insinuate that the violence that's located in our communities are caused because of black men's patriarchy and not the kinds of economic and political marginalization that decades of research have already tied to these
unable problems. To wield power. Then how do you then come back to black men and say you are responsible for something, for a wielding of power that you don't even have? And because one of the things I look at is catcalling, like, and stuff like that. Like that is something that creates a large amount of anxiety and other things. But I don't understand how you view an individual annoyance with somebody having actual power in the richest country in the world?
Well, I think there's a few things here, right? When he's making these distinctions in the piece, he's being dishonest. Okay, I mean that's the first thing that we have to understand. We are talking about a group of people. We're talking about white people who decide where people live, who decides who lives and who dies. Stated differently, think of it this way. This author actually believes that black men, because they have power, organize the society where they have the lowest life expectancy, where they're the most unemployed, least uneducated, least educated, right?
Yep.
Earn less once you start including people who are incarcerated or drop out after 6 months of unemployment, and have the least amount of social mobility. So it's a nonsensical claim to suggest that the relationship that black men have to black women, when he concedes that we do worse than them in practically every demographic category, organize a system, because that's what we're talking about with patriarchy, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about with white supremacy. People who organize social systems, that black men deliberately organize a system where they do worse than their female counterpart, is nonsense. It means that black men are literally the stupidest patriarchs in the history of the world. But then he's able to grab people. See, this is what I mean. This is how the racism is working in the subtext of this piece. He's able to grab people's attention because he knows no one cares about what patriarchy or white supremacy actually is. The point of the article is to show people that the violence associated with black men is a threat to black women. So all he has to do to make this clickbait work is to convey to his audience that black men are fundamentally dangerous. That black men, right? And notice how the themes are working. Black men are dangerous, and black men are more important than black women. So when he uses the example of the NFL and says, "Oh, people are willing to boycott the NFL," this is to show, black women's lives don't matter. You see, this piece isn't deep. It's just a way to encode and to bring people along ideas that they're already been socialized with. We already have a movement saying "say her name" because we say that we don't pay attention to black women's lives. So what does he do? He gives an example of the NFL. See, they don't care about domestic abuse, but if one black man doesn't get a job, look at how people are willing to boycott. See, they don't care about the 9 to 12 or 20 black women that are killed per year based on police brutality. They're not going to march for that. But the 300 black men that are killed per year, they'll march for that. See how your lives don't matter? It's a narcissistic ploy that tries to use the positionality of gender and people's sensitivity to it around black women's issues as a locus by which you can dismiss the violence that's happening to black men. I've asked people this several times when I'm at conferences. They're saying, "We don't march for black women." I say, well, what's the context of this? Because 300 black men are being killed a year by police violence. So that means that in any given year, if we march for 2 or 3, there's still 297 black men that we're not marching for.
Yep.
Because they're the greatest victims of this particular type of violence. Does that mean that black women are not important? No. Why is it that the black women who get killed by police brutality somehow outweigh or have to become the focal point of the other 297 black men? And it puts black people in a position where we're arguing about who gets the most attention for dying. This is what I mean. This is why this is not real. This is about stereotypes. This is about pushing an ideological agenda. What group of people in the history of America have argued about whether or not their oppressors recognize them more or less based on them dying? How does that help anybody? But because we have a competition, because we have gender theory, because we have an intersectional calculus, then we'll always say that black women are at the bottom. Any asymmetry between black men and women, even if it's in terms of who gets on the news because they were shot or who gets a march because they were shot by the police, ends up becoming an issue about privilege and patriarchy. And this is a very, very dangerous logic, right?